I was only 17. So I only weighed about 125, and so I was put through all the hoops, and I managed to get through, but I had to bring papers home for my mother to sign, and she wouldn't sign those until after Christmas. So I ended up in boot camp at 17 on January 4th, 1942. And then, after going to boot training in Newport, I was sent to a school to be an aviation mechanic. Upon finishing that, they were looking for volunteers for aerial gunnery and for PT boats, which had become into the fashion at the time. And I chose to be an aerial gunner. The reason being, I saw a big sign that had a young man leaning over a .50 caliber, and he looked pretty dangerous to me. So I thought that would be a good position for me to be in. And, well, to make a long story short, being as small as I was a good fit, as you can see in the airplane, to the tail gun. So I was given that assignment, and I was able to pass the, what you'd call being an aerial gunner, you had to know how to shoot skeet and trap, so you could track the planes going through the air and shoot them down. And this is what I was put into when I arrived at Kaneohe Bay in the Naval Air Station. I was one of the first places that was hit on December 7th. When I arrived, they put us in a little area on Ford Island, which is one of the first that was hit. And the ships that had been sunk, the entire fleet except for 3 carriers, the ships were all over in the water. All the damage was still there. And standing on Ford Island, we could see them all, and we would throw rocks out from the barracks. It isn't funny, but we thought it was nice. But we did have the sight of the first damage that was occurred. Well, from there, being an aerial gunnery person, they put us through some more training, and we ended up, for the most part, in what we call a PBY, which was an amphibious aircraft. And it was the only thing that was left. There was no marvelous Air Force or ships or anything. It was all bombed out. The planes were all destroyed. And what we had was a couple of squadrons of the PBY. And as it would be, the first sighting that was made in that bay. And there was 5 Japanese midget subs which came into the bay right in Pearl Harbor. And the planes that I was a little bit further on trained in, there were 3 of them up that day, and 3 ensigns on each plane. And I was asked, well, how come there were 3 ensigns doing the flying on that day? And some of the remarks were the lieutenants slept in on Sundays, and this was a Sunday. So all the ensigns were flying in those PBYs, and they sighted the first Jap sub. There was also a destroyer, USS Ward, and they had sighted the same sub. So they fired on the sub, and pilots and the crew, the unit that I was assigned to later on, they dropped and contacted Pearl Harbor that this was going on. But the sub by that time was gone, and we weren't sure who really hit the sub. A couple of years ago, they dug the sub up from the ocean floor, and they found that it had been hit by the destroyer, the USS Ward, and that was solved at that time, that it was the destroyer that hit. But the PBYs were in that action on the first day before the war was declared. So anyway, being with those people, training in the PBYs, it was shown that we had really nothing to work with. They ran probably 150, 40 miles an hour, and they could only fly at low altitude, and they were practically useless. But we'd fly out to Midway, and we'd go down to the New Hebrides, which was on the edge of the Japanese areas, and this was about the limit that we could go. So they decided to get some B-24s, which was an Army Air Corps plane. I have a picture of it here, it's going around. But we got a couple of squadrons of those. We had never even seen one, I hadn't. And they put us into those, and before the last battle of Guadalcanal, I went to Guadalcanal. And at that time, I fitted into the tail turret, so that's where I spent 51 missions in that time, and we were engaged with 3 battles, and there was a lot going on at the time, and so we stayed there for 8 months, and by this time we had advanced up with the Marines and the whole tribe of us up into the slot, which is a place that you had to fly through to get up into the Japanese areas that were up in Rabaul, where they had very many Japanese ships and planes. But that was the edge, that was the perimeter.